We got rituals for damn near anything you want to do, and we can give them to you tonight.
Chris V. Still get it from the intellect reservoir, cosmic surfing. These two sons of God didn't come from virgins. Ether makes up these gods. We rode light angles to the earth plane. Again trapped in skin, but a different name. Monads, been here since Ruth and Moabs. Thought you killed me when Drew and Marcus got toe tagged. That's why I'm here with the Grand Chairman of Fear. Truth make you think critical like severe. Doing the God things, I make ancients appear. And all I'm hearing is knocking while I'm watching a seer. Ancient rituals and sound healing notes through Pro Tools. Eye-to-eye transfers knowledge, you need no schools. Waking up the masses, music is class's stage. Most fail cause they look like they're flying shades. Following demons possess Kanye's and Lil Wayne's. Expecting a hippie with a cross and a Greek name. In a melanin calls me D&B, the link up with no cheese. Orishas in me, I'm not what you don't see. I'm not one of those armchair revolutionaries. Allah is in me, sick and tired of being sick and tired, but that's just where we get our strength, man. The Christ is in me. I'm not a hustler, pimp, gangster, wankster, but trust me, they all in me.
I got it when the moon shifted the tomb in the melanated womb, sipping milk in the honeydew and triple black boom. Touchdown, traveling on planet Earth where we crush clowns, while I'm managing this curse and preparing the elixir that turns copycats into kitty litter. These poor pussies pretending to be misters. I cannot sin, but I can be very sinister. My limitations are limited as I do a lap around the galaxy. Had to gather light and rally back and fuck the fallacy. And cause of that, I got labeled the antagonist. And it didn't help that I cuss and bun cannabis and bun candles and wear symbols of Orishas. And I put a hex on the heads of 7 preachers with one trailer spit aimed at the pulpit. Crush the crucifix, a whole tabernacle backflip. I'm not Catholic, but if I choose my bare resonance, you may just catch a glimpse of Lucifer's semblance. Up and down Jacob's ladder with my melanin, the vessel of no fear none. You can find the devil in.
God's in me, I say that so serious. Turn a nigga to a god, show you I'm serious. Got him proclaiming, name changing and facing with no guilt or fear. All these clansmen masons, we stand on squares, circumscribe our own circumference. Goddess Lakshmi bless me with abundance of prosperity. I speak with clarity, not to confuse. Put Moorish in front everything from Christian to Jews. I'm the anchor, so I don't listen to news on some snail type vibrations making me snooze. Calling a Parker to call down our UFO crews. Like Yahweh or Dogan shamans, we call on Ra Amen. For sun ritual, spiritual, I'm physically trapped. Rewind, play back, and get your pineal tap. Like Gregory Hines, when I'm spitting the rhymes. A&Rs want me to blow, but all rights reserved when we sign. In a melanin calls me D&B, the link up with no cheese. Orishas in me, I'm not what you don't see. I'm not one of those armchair revolutionaries. Allah is in me, sick and tired of being sick and tired, but that's just where we get our strength, man. The Christ is in me. I'm not a hustler, pimp, gangster, wankster, but trust me, they all in me.
Alright, so let's pour the libations on the Guru, Olensu, Shumala, Okija, Chiaja, Cheoa, Alcala, Locayo, Kakambo, La Lula. I need some Lara shades. Issa, Manu, Naku, Mana, Imatu, Tuki, Juba, Joba, and Gandhi, Kasimbo, Nizala, Isala, Azilu Kaya, Azuzu, Dupa, Anumaresh, Aloria, Ida, Ayo, Everett, Rakman, Notario, Maru, Nelly, Yuzu, Yahala, Hele,
Hey, what you said? If you should lose,
The Sufi mystic T4 from the hype Moorish tradition. Perpendicular position, no longer in that mummy state. They lied to us, said we got shipped from miles away. but the old Mac heads look just like me. The flow a gift like patron St. Maurice. That's charitable, these lands inheritable. We're virgin of a state inevitable. So stop this shit, I'm on a plane out of your reach. And I ain't talking Delta seats. All metaphysics with a well blended civics. We caliphs, not lieutenants. This got them jealous like Musa bin Nusayr. Drew Ali revelation, Newt Moors is here. Displaying the art, Khalifa society, matriarch.
Moorish master MC, also a grand sheep, delectable Negro, barbecue when the clan meet. See me in my fez, won't mistake me for black man or colored. Might assume I'm a Masonic brother, brown chronic lover, either roll or edible supper. Vibrate at a high rate, turn to a dimension jumper. Hit the soul plane, quick build with the prophet. Get back to the earth plane, dismissed on the docket. Magistrate lane and vomit, janitor bring the comment. No bond paid, temple gets a deposit. Sketch not composite, left no witness, left blue on the litmus. Get altitude sickness, so high on your head. Whenever I spit this, I'm the type to forget, so you get no forgiveness. Business is strictly like Eric and Parrish. Moreno is my status if you're speaking in Spanish. Ma'am or manish when I draw from the chalice. Looking like the paintings of Arabs. Tiger head rug in the palace, accepting your challenge. Final glove slap since you thought I was average. Carried by 1,000 scarabs over the hot sand. Last name comes from Moors that rule Scots land. Black or Moors you thought Elizabeth got banned. Drew Ali name known again was not planned. Try to call me Indian, no that will not stand. Forget to say the prayer, now I feel I'm in Copland. Forgot the amethyst, start rubbing on stone shaman. Cause a glitch in the matrix, stop feds from charging. Body frozen walking past, the eyes enlarging. With a ray gun like Marvin Martian. That's all folks when we activate carbon. End it all like arson, or your face on a carton.
I'm a Moorish American man, national. 360 degrees is added to my arsenal. Like a carpenter, got me building temples, but mentally noble Jew, I lead the measure and stick your activities. I came here to pregnancy, changing negativity. Precisely, my purpose is to uplift humanity. So why you mad at me? Cause you know I'm a Moor. 2,000 years with the prophet like I've been here before. Go ahead and diss the prophet cause you're so immature. When justice come knock at your door, bodies will get the floor. Like a fofo, puzzle your brain just like a jigsaw. Mufti cut the head off and did we play ping pong. Looking through the peephole cause you hear the ding dong. I don't sing songs, I'm the champ with no rings on. Concrete jungle gives a fuck about King Kong. I'm ready to go and when I die I scream out yeehaw like Kid John. Cause my last words would be Islam. What up more, my higher self is keeping me this calm.
Said black means death, but y'all blind and deaf and can't read truth you can't find. Miss Drew Ali lessons waiting for Jesus. Teaching lies is competence, nigga doesn't mean niggas. More doesn't mean black, it means more bite. And high priest of a new, holding the marvelous light. 7 orbs in our palm, we are ancients returned. From the line of roots, skin looks like brass burned. Hair looks like Zoroaster, face of an old neck. Sundial is my watch, FOH with your Rolex. Major not minority, no clicking heels like... Said black means death, but y'all blind and deaf and can't read truth you can't find. Miss Drew Ali lessons waiting for Jesus. Teaching lies is competence, nigga doesn't mean niggas. More doesn't mean black, it means more bite. And high priest of a new, holding the marvelous light. 7 orbs in our palm, we are ancients returned. From the line of roots, skin looks like brass burned. Hair looks just like Zoroaster, face of an old neck. Sundial is my watch, FOA trick your Rolex. Major not minority, no clicking heels like Dorothy. Flames on a straw man, no joining their sorority. Great Seal is not Illuminati but Moorish. Disrespect Moors and we might get boorish. We're in our own land fam, don't call me a tourist. I use the floor more, fine tuning my auras. Let them know that I'm back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth. Let them know that you're back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth. Let them know that I'm back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth. Let them know that you're back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth.
Get your foot up off my ottoman. Empire built for an ottoman. Never mix me up for them ottoman. I'm writing with an iron pen. Good life and not a gem. Born in an empire, not in sin. Moorish American, round table, Moorish ordering. I am feminine and masculine. Principle, rights inalienable. So I'm able. Now Cain wants to kill me. Biblical. My brother who pretends to be brotherly. Try to put me back in slavery. Confederate flags under my cherry tree. Washington cut it down, but Washington is still in me. Moors, yo, I speak the tongue, uplift the blind, the deaf, the dumb, and everything is mine, you some. Legislative act, municipal outcomes. Animal farm, I see the reruns. Nation never cared for a president. Trudeau in a turban, that's evident. Major not minor, that's permanent.
Let them know that I'm back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth. Let them know that you're back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth. Let them know that I'm back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth. Let them know that you're back in the booth, back for the youth. Words coming out of mouth is the truth.
To all the wonderful works he's brought unto us. Give honor to the harbinger, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, for teaching government structure, diplomatic principles, etc., in harmony with the prophet for the return and the restructuring and the resurrection of the ancient Canaanite Moabite nation of the North Gate. And as a countermeasure to the operations of the Romans who have declared a mission to declare the bishopric of Rome as God of the planet and have caused destruction amongst all Aboriginal and indigenous people. And so Allah prepared our divine prophet Noble Ali to restore and to resurrect the nation in accord with Ruth the Moabitess, Yeshua's great-great-great-grandmother who prayed for the restoration of the nation, etc. And so we have the old Canaanite temple, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, the Moorish Science Temple of America, as a remedy for a sin-sick world. And I want to give honor to Grand Sheikh Messiah, his wife, etc., and all working Moors for having the courage, and it takes work to establish a Moorish Science Temple in honor of what the Prophet set up, and trusting that the principles that the Prophet set up will be conjoined with this temple for the resurrection of the people. For certainly, if it's structured in order as the Prophet set up, you won't have enough seats. And when the principles are violated, that's when them temples get empty. Because in this Aquarian age, the Spirit is speaking to the people, and the people know when they're being played, or when people come to them honestly to raise them up out of the depths of poverty and ignorance. etc. So with us, we come and give support.
Go tell them. They don't stay.
And so Allah prepared our divine prophet Noble Ali to restore and to resurrect the nation in accord with Ruth the Moabitess, Yeshua's great-great-great-grandmother who prayed for the restoration of the nation, etc. And so we have the old Canaanite temple, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, the Moorish Science Temple of America, as a remedy for a sin-sick world. And I want to give honor to Grand Sheikh Messiah, his wife, etc., and all working Moors for having the courage, and it takes work to establish a Moorish Science Temple in honor of what the Prophet set up, and trusting that the principles that the Prophet set up will be conjoined with this temple for the resurrection of the people. For certainly, if it's structured in order as the Prophet set up, you won't have enough seats. And when the principles are violated, that's when them temples get empty. Because in this Aquarian age, the Spirit is speaking to the people, and the people know when they're being played, or when people come to them honestly to raise them up out of the depths of poverty and ignorance. etc. So with us, we come and give support with all that we have in the spirit of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice for the support of this temple, etc., which is a regency in this resurrection work that must take place. I also want to mention to all Moorish Americans, one of the things that we must do when we come together in our organizations is to recognize that the Moorish Divine and National Movement is the umbrella for the multiple organizations that are in place or that have been established for the resurrection of the Moorish nation and the re-education of our people to prepare them not only to reclaim, to receive their lost estate, but to have the competence and capacity to deal with the rest of the civilized world on a competent level, capable level, civilized level, knowledge level, so that we can again run our government accordingly. Now the Prophet said, in order to change the people, you must change their literature. The Prophet established the Moorish Guide and the Moorish Monitor. He had 2 newspapers for the Moors. And one of the charges that the Prophet made to the Grand Sheikhs, he said, our own press is the most powerful weapon in the hand of our group today. Without a press of our own, we'll never be able to shovel ourselves out from under the lies that are heaped upon us every day. And that was a charge that was put on the grand body of the brothers and sisters, sheikhs, grand sheikhs, moderators, chairmen, etc. of the Moorish Divine and National Movement. So keep this in mind. When you come into a temple, if they have not carried out the Prophet's word, you can understand why we're 101 years right now dealing with this battle. So a press is part of the temple. The Prophet also commanded in the structure of the Moorish Divine National Movement for all the temples that they must have a school. That's not an option. That's a part of the component parts of the temple, is a school. He says it's a conflict of interest to send your children to the European and then come home and try to tell them things of their own culture, and they come in conflict with that. And therefore you are required to have a school for your own. And when you go into the history, you will find that there were schools in all the temples when the Prophet was on the scene, because that was a requirement. Unfortunately, we had, for those who have studied, and this is why the Prophet, and I'm appreciative of the Grand Sheikh reading the letter that the Prophet commanded to be read before every meeting. And unfortunately, you go to many temples, they won't read that letter. And the reason they won't read that letter because some of the people who have turbans and fezzes on are actually Cointelpro operatives. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And one of the things that we cannot do with our people is try to hide certain truths because we want them to feel comfortable, because that does not help. And one of the reasons why we have problems in keeping membership in a lot of the temples is because people read now. They used not to read. But as literature is out there, and of course you've got internet also, anybody can find the FBI papers and see why a lot of them Grand Sheikhs don't want to read that letter, because some of them are Cointelpro operatives. And your common sense will start revealing to you.
So just so you don't think that we're the Cointelpro people, we just want to read the letter. Just put it on the record, just read the letter. Just so you know who you're dealing with. So just going to read the letter that the traitors didn't read to you. So you know how serious it was during Noble Drew Ali's time, and that he already knew what was up. Friday, January 15, 1929. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical agitating speeches while at work in their homes or on the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom. And when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet, or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing your turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out the divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Noble Drew Ali. Prophet warns all Muslims, not Muslims, because Moors aren't Muslim, all Muslims, governors, ordered to read proclamation at each meeting. Ordered. Ordered. So those who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet by not protecting their prophet and the temple, you worry about some divine constitution you violated? You worried about that? I wouldn't worry about you violated that. How about all the people who lost confidence in the prophet but didn't give up their fez, and didn't give up their buttons, and didn't give up their Moorish regalia? But they're not repping for the prophet. How come they get to wear turbans? Last time they put something out of Noble Drew Ali on their stuff. What are you talking about? Some people never. They're Moors though, but not one Drew Ali up there. Nothing. Drew Ali's hand, nothing. All right.
It's not unlike, say, somebody going down to the corner to Dunkin' Donuts to get a cup of coffee, and you go in a cup of coffee for Dunkin' Donuts, and they say, well, we ain't into donuts and coffee. And that will kind of confuse you because Dunkin' Donuts has coffee and donuts. And so when you come into a Moorish Science Temple and they don't maintain a press and don't maintain a school, which are command component parts that a temple must have, not optional, must have, you kind of know it's Cointelpro already. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And so what happens is...
And just so you know, that we're not the Cointelpro people, just so you're clear that we're not the Cointelpro people, members in our temple said they want their own school. And they started their own school to teach their children. So our temple has a school, just so you know, so you don't try to connect us with the traders and the sellouts and all that stuff who aren't doing what Noble Drew Ali said to do. Just putting it out there. And there's not some grand chic stuff like that. Support the school, 5 billion%. But it's the parents realizing that those schools are not going to teach their children what they're supposed to know. So they better step up and do for their children. And then right on cue, we're talking about the Moorish school. It's confirmed. We can't make it up. We can't make it up that we're talking about Canaanland Moorish school, and then people from the Moorish school get on the live. We can't make it up. It's a lot of guys this. It's us giving honors to Noble Drew Ali from the jump. Oh yeah, for honors to Grand Sheikh, Amir, Vizier, Grand, whatever you want to call him. Tarik Bey. For always repping for Noble Drew Ali. Always. Without question, always repping for Noble Drew Ali and making sure that the people know about him in his full capacity, not as some religious guy. So honors to Tarik Bey. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what's up. People playing games with you. And they're going to keep playing games with you. Like we say, we're just sticking our head out from behind the veil. Waving the red flag. Whoever sees it runs over, good for you. Everybody else, see you next time we get out the veil.
Just like the Grand Sheikh said, what happens is our children grow up, and then the children have children, and as soon as they come into the temple, they run out because there's nothing to hold them. You see? So it appears, and then the people start saying, well, they don't appreciate what the prophet did. They don't want to be in the temple, when the real deal is that they don't want to charge the administrators with corruption, malfeasance, and misappropriation of the funds, which is what they've been doing. Which is why there's no schools, which is why there are no newspapers. And this is why the prophet did caveat emptor. And this is also why the prophet, can I have your questionnaire? And this is also why the prophet did additional bylaws, which are in the back of the questionnaire, which you all know. And you see the additional questionnaire, additional laws, for the Moorish etc., right? Yeah. Act 1 as an example. I'm going to read Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, and I'm going to read Act 1 of the additional laws for the Moorish Americans. And keep in mind, the additional laws were done because of people in position of administrative powers who were misappropriating funds, misrepresenting the prophet, trying to take over the movement, trying to make clubs out of the temples rather than teaching national principles, were denying any constructive activities, were doing everything they could to shut down the prophet's newspapers, were making sure there were no schools in the temples, and they would rob.
Yeah, so we told you about the school, right? So don't forget. Just keep in mind that Moors had our newspaper. Active Moors, whether it's this, whether it's Abdullah's paper, whether it's Canaanland Moors paper. Right? We did our part. We put our paper out. I know the other Moors could tell you about they put out a paper. But we put our paper out. Sorry, there was only 1,000. It was only 1,000, And most of them got given away for free because, you know, people not going to pay $800 for this. Why $800? Yeah, you can't say that. This is a Canaanland Moors newspaper. This is Noble Drew Ali history in the making. You're living the history of Noble Drew Ali right now. He said he was going to have a temple here. There's a temple here. And the temple, he said, they're supposed to have a school, they're supposed to have a newspaper. There's a temple. You still think Allah's not guiding this? Think we're making this up? It's not make believe. You think Prince doesn't know? He doesn't know. You tell me he doesn't know? Stop the BS. Do you think Beyonce doesn't know? How doesn't she know when he's right here next to her? What do you mean she doesn't know? This guy, this is a more that people know. This is a more that has Facebook and IG and all that stuff. People know this more. There's more who got recorded being on the bus and all this type of stuff. Just killing Moors about their stuff. And he knows. He knows about Noble Drew Ali and all that. So if he knows and he's standing next to her and then you think, oh, they don't know. Okay. You think Pac didn't know? So you're telling me you rep. You're going to rep, right? You're going to rep poetic justice and all that stuff, right? How you repping poetic justice? Oh yeah, and Janet converted to Islam too. Stop playing. Stop the BS. Everybody knows. You think Pat didn't know? Or you didn't know, right? Or you just standing like just because it's cool. It's just cool to do this. I'm Tupac, I'm doing this cool thing. Stop the dumb stuff. You think Lil Wayne doesn't know? He doesn't know? How doesn't he know? Why is he doing this if he doesn't know? Lil Wayne doesn't know? You think he doesn't know? Or you get caught up on the stuff you see on TV, or that's what you're looking at. Oh, okay. Oh. The one-eyed monster got you, huh? Okay. All right. We know the one-eyed monster got you. We're not talking about TV. This is real. This is real happening right now in your face. Noble Drew Ali and the Moors. Happening right now. Who am I? Who am I to talk? Let the master teacher talk.
The finance to make sure that the sheikesses and the sheiks could not establish schools so that the people would get the impression that when they walked into those buildings that they were temples, but they were temples in name only. And what you would find, and when you go into the FBI papers, you'll find that that was a strategy of schisms that was used by the CIA and FBI under Cointelpro operations because the movement was so strong that they took the position that they would not be able to break the movement up. So the position was to put people in positions of power and to actually misguide the movement. Do you understand? In other words, to come into the movement, use the name, and then shut down the national side of the movement, make sure there's no newspapers, make sure there's no schools, make sure they would collect transportation funds and yet buy no buses. And so they would be draining the people's finances, having the people spinning their wheels. Then the generations would grow up, and the things that the prophet set for the Moorish Americans, the finances would be squandered, and then they would convert it into churches, and then the people would get frustrated and leave. And it worked. But the prophet said, they might slow me down, but they can't stop me. I'm going to read Act 1. And this is because a lot of the Cointelpro operatives will tell the people that Drew Ali didn't teach civics and he didn't teach law. So I'm going to go into divine warning after I read.
Oh yeah. And then the other letter that was supposed to be read every meeting that the sellouts didn't read to you. This is the other letter. To be proclaimed at every meeting. Islam. I am glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement now, by the same people of our side of the nation that claim that it was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens. I thought Noble Drew Ali didn't teach law. I thought Noble Drew Ali didn't teach civics. I thought Noble Drew Ali is some black religious leader guy with the red hat. Clearly he's speaking law right here. Oh yeah, this is the stuff to be read every meeting that they never read to you. Because everybody sold out your stuff, squandered their stuff, and they're still doing it today. And then, let's get back to this letter. They are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me, so they may take charge of the situation. And then they took charge of the situation and then started churches and mosques and all this other BS that have nothing to do with your birthrights. People sold you out. Because Drew Ali is the foundation of all of that in America. There's no one before him that was presenting Islam. No one. He's the foundation of that. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that attribute to the movement and uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That is why I am calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance, and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without I, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works, which I have performed in the past few years. Prophet Noble Drew Ali.
Yes, I'm only going to read Act 1 and Act 1 of both the constitutional bylaws and the additional bylaws. And you consider for yourself the words of your prophet. And again, the prophet charged us to do what? Protect what? Your prophet and your Moorish divine national movement. The charge is upon you to protect this. This is for you. It's for your earthly and spiritual salvation. Act 1 of divine constitutional bylaws. The Grand Sheikh and the chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America is in power to make law and enforce laws with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. The Assistant Grand Sheikh is to assist the Grand Sheikh in all affairs if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and it is known before the members of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. That's just Act 1. How often have I heard people call me from around the world, not just on this continent, and get confused because some grand governors are telling them or saying on radio stations or countering the act of Moors saying Drew Ali didn't teach civics and he didn't teach law. And there it is in Act 1. Now let's read some of the counteractions that the Prophet had to do for some of these Cointelpro operatives that were within the movement, as expressed in that letter, trying to take over the movement from the internal and trying to disqualify him and take charge of the matter. This is also why he did caveat emptor, which you'll find in the Moorish literature. You'll find caveat emptor in the Moorish literature where the prophet addressed the Cointelpro operatives that were internally trying to disrupt the temples. Act 1. Grand sheikhs and governors and heads of all temples, all businesses. Each said temple must be approved by the Prophet Noble Ali before acting upon by any members, let it be finance, property, or any line of life that will cause the members to sacrifice finance, etc., that will cause the support of any group of members, and any former officer that violates these laws is subject to be removed from his office under a heavy restriction, etc., by the Prophet or the Grand Sheikh. But those rules had not been carried out. And so this is why we're 101 years right now. Praise Allah, Brother Messiah having the courage to take the step to open up the Moorish Science Temple to help in this great missionary work, even when there's a credibility issue. But you come honorably. When you come honorably, the people will come. If you do not carry out honorably, don't worry, you'll be sitting watching light bulbs by yourself. And it's true. You know, this is the age of Aquarius. The light has come. And nobody's going for any BS anymore. They're coming for resolution. They're coming for solution. And it's not that we're incapable of it. Our resources and our energies have been distracted. And so therefore, the Prophet has set a program by which that energy can be channeled and you can produce. We certainly run things for everybody else. We can certainly run things for ourselves. The deal with the Moors is that they do not understand government. They do not understand estate law. They do not understand contract law. They do not understand true spirituality because it was never given to them. They were given dogma in place of true religion. Therefore, they don't know the codes. They don't know the mother-father principle. When you talk in Allah, Allah is a feminine name, a feminine word, all right, attribute, etc. Father, as Grand Sheikh Rasmarai V. Bey said, is a process. And so when you see Allah, the Father of the universe, you're saying mother, father. As soon as you go back to the state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, you'll find that all true religion is mother-father principle. Then when you study, you will find that the priesthood of Rome removed the feminine principle from true religion in order for the popes of Rome to have the capacity to rule the world. But you won't know that until you start studying. So when you look at that prayer, he actually gave you the keys in the first sentence. But people who are caught into the dividing schism principle taught by the Roman low priests, low-lying sorcerers, are playing that male-female competition game, which is a fraud, a total fraud. But people won't even understand that until they really study true religion. So that's a point for you to do in your spare time. Also, when you go into the Bibles, Tanakh, Uaspi, the four Vedas, Pentateuch, Hexateuch, Torah, etc., you will find that they are entirely Kabbalistic. All Grand Sheiks know that, all adepts know that, all Masons know that, all Skull and Bones know that, all Kyklos know that, all Clanners know that, all Eastern Stars know that, all rabbis know that, all imams know that, but they don't tell the congregations because they got them as slaves, paying them, making them think they love Jesus, God, Allah, Muhammad. And that's the real truth why a lot of them don't like the Prophet, because he pulled the cover off of all of them. And that's the real truth. And so when you begin to really study and go back to the state of mind of your mothers and fathers, you find out that you're in a battle. So don't get it twisted. Let's not, try to put some ice cream coating on this stuff. This stuff is ugly. But yet it is necessary for you to have a chance for these babies to have a chance. And if you don't want the truth, step out the way, give the babies a chance. That's why he said, I come for the young and the yet unborn. The old can go if they want to. But one thing is for sure, Rome's going to do what they got to do. we can make the decision whether we want to serve the spirits of our own mothers and fathers or whether we want to serve the Romans, because that's what's really going on. And once you study both politics, law, and history, and real religion, you're going to find this out anyway. So I'm just being blunt. And a lot of times when you're being blunt with people, they get uncomfortable because they want you to give them some nice little, naive statements, and everybody says hallelujah to you and wave their hands and go home. Well, I don't play like that. Because I'm not in the mood for my babies to be going through no nigger problems that we went through. You know what I mean? Our people that's gone to and fro the earth, fighting wars against their own brothers and sisters to keep these Romans in power, and then come back here and march and pray with some Negro organizations that are totally fake, wasting their time, wasting their energy, and then watching their babies die younger and younger and their families fall apart and pretend to be spiritual. And we need to be stop being hypocrites that we've been and start really getting really down with real knowledge, real history, and start solving the problems of the world. Because the Creator made us in her image and her likeness, and we have a responsibility to develop and use those powers given to us. And stop looking for something outside to do what we should be doing ourselves. ETC. So I want to, a few years ago, we flew to Detroit, and we were talking to a few Moorish Americans, and I won't mention names, but one of the sheikesses and sheik were going into chamber, and we were just talking, just casually as we always do. And one of the things I recognized is that there was a limited knowledge of the structure of the temple with them, and they've been in the temple 13 years. So I did this little bifold, and Rosnaraya has always been very skilled in graphics. And so she put this together. As a matter of fact, we did that almost on the spot, making sure before we left Detroit that this was left with them. Because a lot of people were coming into the temples, and then they'd be there for a minute, and then they'd run. Because, common sense would tell them they need this. They need to do this, they didn't need to do that, and they didn't even know the prophet had already set this stuff up. But they weren't being told. Do you understand what I'm saying? And people get frustrated when they come honorably to do something, and then they see people suppressing knowledge, hiding information, taking their finances, not doing with the finances what they're telling they're collecting for. I'll give you an example. I was in the temple in Camden. They were collecting bus funds like for years. And I'm going to cut through the chase. So I came to the temple, brought my sisters in, my brothers, and a lot of people can't do that with their family. I brought all of them in. Even my brother-in-laws, 2 of them, left the Masonic lodges and came to the temple. We gave thousands of notes, dedicated. My sisters and them were coming like on a regular basis. And they always had this transportation fund, bus fund, etc. We was giving finance, and and then brothers and sisters would always have to go pick up sisters with their children who didn't have transportation and everything. And, well, you got this bus fund. Hey, you all been collecting this bus fund for 20 years? Where's the bus? So I went out on Route 73. I took off from work, went out on Route 73. And when I looked at the literature, I saw, from what I saw in the prophet, I saw nationhood, if you understand. So I went out there, Route 73, where they had buses, and I was getting a used bus, really good shape, out there where they sell buses. And I got them to bring the bus down from like 15,000, on a wholesale basis to like $5,000, stuff like this, with no taxes. Because I understand nationality. I'm not a dummy. And so I brought the papers back. Then I went to see Bernie Hammond now Bernie Hammond is European. He was like head of the houses and stuff in the Camden area, in Camden County. And I went down there, they were selling shells, like tore down shells around Cooper Hospital for like $100,000, $120,000. These places was falling down, and just for the shells cost $20,000. The developers were coming in from New York and from around. So I went in there and I went up on the 13th floor and went in the room, had my fez on, because I just came in the temple. I was only in the temple about 6 months at that time. And I wanted to get some properties for the temples because we had a few contractors in there, and my plan was we fix the buildings up, you know, and we would ourselves have people paying for it, and it would go back to the temple. They wouldn't have mortgages. They would now Bernie Hammond, is European. He was like head of the houses and stuff in the Camden area, in Camden County. And I went down there. They were selling shells, you know, like tore down shells around Cooper Hospital for like 100 grand, 120 grand. I mean, these places was falling down, and just for the shells, cost 20 grand. And the developers were coming in from New York and from around. So I went in there and I went up on the 13th floor and went in the room, had my fez on, because I just came in the temple. I was only in the temple about 6 months at that time. And I wanted to get some properties for the temples because we had a few contractors in there, and my plan was we fix the buildings up, you know, and we would ourselves have people paying for it, and it would go back to the temple. They wouldn't have mortgages. They would just pay what they could, and the women who were renting or single moms and stuff like that, they would have a place, you know. Now Bernie Hammond is European. He was like head of the houses and stuff in the Camden area, in Camden County. And I went down there. They were selling shells, you know, like tore down shells around Cooper Hospital for like 100 grand, 120 grand. I mean, these places was falling down, and just for the shells, cost 20 grand. And the developers were coming in from New York and from around. So I went in there and I went up on the 13th floor and went in the room, had my fez on, because I just came in the temple. I was only in the temple about 6 months at that time. And I wanted to get some properties for the temples because we had a few contractors in there, and my plan was we fix the buildings up, you know, and we would ourselves have people paying for it, and it would go back to the temple. They wouldn't have mortgages. They would just pay what they could, and the women who were renting or single moms and stuff like that, they would have a place, you know, because we got all these skills here. I got 13 buildings, and I got a building on 6 and Spruce. It was falling down, and just for the shells, cost 20 grand. And the developers were coming in from New York and from around. So I went in there, and I went up on the 13th floor, and went in the room, had my fez on, because I just came in the temple. I was only in the temple about 6 months at that time. And I wanted to get some properties for the temples because we had a few contractors in there, and my plan was we fix the buildings up, you know, and we would ourselves have people paying for it, and it would go back to the temple. They wouldn't have mortgages. They would just pay what they could, and the women who were renting or single moms and stuff like that, they would have a place, you know, because we got all these skills here. I got 13 buildings, and I got a building on 6 and Spruce, a 3-story, another building for the temple and the parking lot, and I got all of it for $2,200. He told me, what you want? Yes. He closed the door. He gave me 2 books. And remember, these shells were selling for 100 grand, and the cheapest ones were like 80,000, right? I got them all for $2,200. I went back, gave it to Grand Chief David, and they accused me of trying to take over temple. Yes, they did, and they lost those papers. I wrote books for my children, and I got all of it for $2,200. He told me, what you want? Yes. He closed the door. He gave me 2 books. And remember, these shells were selling for 100 grand, and the cheapest ones were like 80,000, right? I got them all for $2,200. I went back, gave it to Grand Chief David, and they accused me of trying to take over temple. Yes, they did, and they lost those papers. I wrote books for my children, and they started attacking my sisters. Yes, they did. My sisters were coming in on a regular basis, dedicated. The cheapest ones was like 80,000, right? I got them all 2,200. I went back, gave it to Grand Chief David, and they accused me of trying to take over town. Yes, they did. And they lost those papers. I wrote books for my children, and they started attacking my sisters. Yes, they did. My sisters were coming in on a regular basis, dedicated. Wouldn't give her a Quran. They had this like clique thing going on. And finally, through my niece Kia, they gave her the Quran to take to my sister, because my sister cried one time and left. And so they finally were going to give her a Quran, and they sent the Quran to my sister through my niece Kia, wrapped in coffee-stained, wrinkled Courier Post newspaper. My sisters left, they never came back. They gave her the Quran to take to my sister, because my sister cried one time and left. And so they finally were going to give her a Quran, and they sent the Quran to my sister through my niece Kia, wrapped in coffee-stained, wrinkled Courier Post newspaper. My sisters left, they never came back. They gave her the Quran to take to my sister, because my sister cried one time and left. And so they finally were going to give her a Quran, and they sent the Quran to my sister through my niece Kia, wrapped in coffee-stained, wrinkled Courier Post newspaper. My sisters left, they never came back. That's when I founded the Round Table. And I've been doing what I do ever since, you know,
So that's the backstory. That's the backstory to why you see Moors right now have been doing what they're supposed to do. Not from the stage platform of Moor Science Temple, because they were doing stuff like this to genuine, sincere Moors who just want to help. That's Cointelpro. That's the sellout. That's the same type of energy that Noble Drew Ali got murdered under. So he told him to read the stuff, to read every meeting. Played him. Played. No, you know, what you're going to do. There's traitors. So you're going to do what you're supposed to do. Be sincere, be honorable, be faithful to Drew Ali and the principles, and you'll be all right. You'll be all right.
It took me a while to figure this stuff out, you know, but it's some dirty Moors in this place. So don't you get it twisted. And the Prophet warned us, he said, be careful, Moors. Some of these Muslims, with turbans and feathers on, will be trying to put you back into slavery. So when you all hear sometimes of the schisms, understand there's a background of history here. You know what I mean? But I'm dedicated to the resurrection of the Moorish nation. And whenever somebody's going to do something to help uplift fallen humanity, I'm with them. And the Prophet said to the Moors, he says, if you're around a bunch of Moors with a bunch of confusion that's not carrying out my law, he said, get out from under them. Go find somebody that's doing good and help them do more good. That's the Prophet's words. He's trying to put you back into slavery. So when you all hear do ever since, you know, but it took me a while to figure this stuff out, you know, but it's some dirty Moors in this place. So don't you get it twisted. And the prophet warned us, he said, be careful, Moors. Some of these Muslims, with turbans and feathers on, will be trying to put you back into slavery. So when you all hear sometimes of the schisms, understand there's a background of history here. You know what I mean? But I'm dedicated to the resurrection of the Moorish nation. And whenever somebody's going to do something to help uplift fallen humanity, I'm with them. And the prophet said to the Moors, he says, if you're around a bunch of Moors with a bunch of confusion that's not carrying out my law, he said, get out from under them. Go find somebody that's doing good and help them do more good. That's the prophet's words. Here's the structure. The Moorish divine and national movement. Old Canaanite Temple, Newark, New Jersey, 1913 AD. Derived from that, Moorish Holy Temple of Science. Civic organization, 1925-1926 AD. Derived from that, Moorish Science Temple of America with a religious affidavit, religious organization, 1928 AD. Noble Ali laid his form down almost a year later, 1929, and they assassinated him and wrote on his death certificate that he died from pneumonia when actually they assassinated him. Delivered him to the hand of the same dirty Moors that have been corrupting the movement and have the reason why right now we have to have these meetings right now, 101 years later, to try to make sure people understand nationality, that this is not a club. This is a resurrection of the nation and the largest estate in world history. The wealthiest people who are the poorest and think nationality is a religion because some criminal who's betraying the prophet told them that, and so they don't take this information properly. And so our children are poor, our families are falling apart, and they have the largest estate the world has ever known. And they, not knowing civics, which Drali set up with the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, they don't know estate law, but yet the prophet brought back to the Moors the title to their lost estate, their names and their nationalities, and half of them are looking at it like it's a belief system because some grand governor told them that. You see the problem that we have? So even when they receive this information, the way they address it usually is naive or improper. And then their concepts are wrong because they're looking at it from a belief perspective when it's actual national law, internationally recognized, with the heirs to an estate who keep thinking human beings are crayons, which constitutes incompetency. And so they must learn government, they must learn contract law, they must learn estate law. This is why when he set up the old Canaanite temple and the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, he said, put your stuff in the name of the temple.
Oh, yeah, so the thing with the Moroccan flag was, this was, I can't remember, but it was a Masonic spot, right, near Delaware. And that flag was just in there. So they just said, we'll put green and red balloons up. And the green and red was going to represent the flag. And nobody had an issue because, you know, what we got to do. We can't take the stuff off the wall or whatever. So it's all about the message, not the theatrics.
Protect your estate. And because some of the sellout grand sheiks wouldn't teach civics, the people were really just doing church. And so they were losing land, houses, and everything, and didn't even know they're standing on their own estate, on fraud mortgages. And it must be known to you that when the prophet set up the old Canaanite temple for the resurrection and the restoration of the estate, Woodrow Wilson met with representatives of the popes of Rome and the European bankers under the secret Treaty of Verona off Jekyll Island in Georgia, and were selling the government. And that's when mortgages began in 1913. Before 1913, there were no mortgages. There were allodial titles. And when you talk to the Moors about allodial titles, you know, when they're supposed to know that because the prophet brought the title back to you. And in the temple, and they're looking at you like you're doing something that the prophet didn't say. Do you understand? And so we have, I'm grateful, you know, that we have Moors that got some courage to tell the truth in the face of a bunch of liars and giving our babies a chance, you know. And also, when you look, as Sister Mariah was saying, give me the question there. Now, what you're going to find when you go back, the prophet said, go back to the state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers. Didn't he say that? And when you do, you're going to find out that Alim, Allah, Elohim, all are in their nature feminine, but in the character.
So the cameraman was because there was no camera stand, so I just had a camera. And there was nothing to put it on. Everything was, nothing worked except some Jimmy screeching thing, making up something for the camera to sit on, because there was just nothing. It was just chairs, open space, that's it. And nobody wanted to just sit there holding it. So it was like, well, we'll just be quiet. We'll just be quiet, and you know, the camera's just gonna move. We're just gonna have to listen. So that's what happened with the camera. There was no stand, and nobody wanted to hold it.
The true Hebrew construct is mother-father. That's what it means. Eloah is Hebrew, what you would call Hebrew for the feminine. Im is Hebrew for the or the masculine. Mother-father. Elohim means mother-father. And they'll tell you in the church, mosque, synagogues, that Elohim means God, but won't tell you it means mother-father. You see the problem? But until you go back to the state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, you would not know that. But when coming into the Moorish Science Temple of America, you're supposed to be told that, because you're supposed to be taken out of the depths of ignorance and brought into the marvelous light. And this is why the prophet even tailored the Circle 7 even for you, to give you keys to get you back to the state of mind that you need to be in, because everybody knows but you. Meanwhile, the Europeans got a bunch of Masonic orders where they preserve your knowledge for their selfish selves, for the purpose of keeping it from you. Even this hall that we're sitting in right now, these Europeans know this knowledge. But they're using it for their own development. Do you understand? And even when they talk about Jesus was a carpenter, they're talking about that compass in the square. That compass to encircle your passions, and that square to make your conduct, to construct in character what man does in the beauty of buildings, you must do internally. That's what that really means. And Ma, son, that's mother and son. See that? Mother, son, Elohim, my son, Isis, and Horus on her knee, and the duplication in the church with Mary and Jesus, and the study of Masonry. That's what it is. That's what Masonry is. Mother, son, and the study of. You know, and so they're taking your own science and ruling you with it, and then they tell you, it's devil worship. And then our people don't even look at it because it's their own science. And here we are poor on our own land, and our people are working for Europeans, paying taxes to Europeans on their own land, and don't even know it. Meanwhile, the prophet came to redeem us and give this back, and establish this order that this information will be delivered to you. How dare us be in this time 101 years, and we still have to do this to deliver to you what was brought to you. Masonry, that's what it is. That's what Masonry is. Mother, son, and the study of. You know, and so they're taking your own science and ruling you with it, and then they tell you, it's devil worship. And then our people don't even look at it because it's their own science. And here we are poor on our own land, and our people are working for Europeans, paying taxes to Europeans on their own land and don't even know it. Meanwhile, the prophet came to redeem us and give this back and establish this order that this information will be delivered to you. How dare us be in this time 101 years and we still have to do this to deliver to you what was brought to you a century ago, to bring that common understanding. Thus, the prophet said, in order to change the people, you must change their literature. And that is a charge. That's not an option. That's a charge. To redeem us and give this back. And establish this order that this information will be delivered to you. How dare us be in this time 101 years and we still have to do this to deliver to you what was brought to you a century ago. To bring that common understanding. Thus, the prophet said, in order to change the people, you must change their literature. And that is a charge. That's not an option. That's a charge. So when you're going to go with these people in any of these places around here, to tell the difference between Cointelpro operatives and those who are carrying out the prophet's order, always measure them by what the prophet set up. Isn't that simple? Huh? It's called a delegation of authority. It's called a charter. It's called a purpose, a cause, right? So the old Canaanite temple, Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and Moorish Science Temple of America. Schools for Moorish children. Industry and business. Press, newspapers, and literature. Young Businessmen's League. And that's a great cover, and I'm going to make sure that you all get that. It's like this, except it's a gray cover. And it has a divine warning in here, and it's the Young Businessmen's League. And you won't even see that in the temples because they don't want the Moors to see that the prophet taught business. Schools for Moorish children. Industry and business. Press, newspapers, and literature. Young Businessmen's League. And that's a great cover, and I'm going to make sure that you all get that. It's like this, except it's a gray cover. And it has a divine warning in here, and it's the Young Businessmen's League. And you won't even see that in the temples because they don't want the Moors to see that the prophet taught business. Schools for Moorish children. Industry and business. Press, newspapers, and literature. Young Businessmen's League. And that's a great cover, and I'm going to make sure that you all get that. It's like this, except it's a gray cover. And it has a divine warning in here, and it's the Young Businessmen's League. And you won't even see that in the temples because they don't want the Moors to see that the prophet taught business. Oh, the Grand Governor guys. No? Woman's Auxiliary. And Sister Pearl Ali, the prophet's wife, set that up. And you don't have that. That's part of the temples. Moorish Community Development. It's what we doing business, development, etc., just like the Grand Sheikh said. Civics, law, and instruction communications. That's within school because you're supposed to be studying Constitution law. All of you are supposed to be constitutionalists. All of you supposed to know international law because you're supposed to have already taken your places amongst the affairs of men. You're supposed to already have counselors amongst yourselves. You're supposed to already have been in communication with other governments, etc., and they've been calling on you all the time, waiting for you, and here we are still playing half churchy. No, serious, what's wrong with us? You know, you understand, but don't get angry, get even. Study, study, study. And when you would have studied well, and would ask me what to study next, the prophet said what? Study yourselves. You're supposed to already have been in communication with other governments, etc., and they've been calling on you all the time, waiting for you, and here we are still playing half churchy. No, serious, what's wrong with us? You know, you understand, but don't get angry, get even. Study, study, study. And when you would have studied well, and would ask me what to study next, the prophet said what? Study yourselves. You know, and so we want to encourage you to support, but know what you're supporting. You know, I would say go on a trip, go on a journey, You know, just like the prophet said, to a destination not unknown, you see, because he laid it out. So it's nothing to figure out. You know, like people will talk about the Moorish movement and say, you know, what that's all about, or trying to figure out what it's all about. You don't need to figure it out, what it's all about, because the prophet told you. And if the Moors would take this information to the people would fill these buildings. We have, you see, because he laid it out. So it's nothing to figure out. You know, like people will talk about the Moorish movement and say, you know, what that's all about, or trying to figure out what it's all about. You don't need to figure it out, what it's all about, because the prophet told you. And if the Moors would take this information to the people would fill these buildings. We have the resources. Our resources are being drained because our people take them to other institutions, you see? That's what our problem is. And so our children have nothing. So to the people would fill these buildings. We have the resources. Our resources are being drained because our people take them to other institutions, you see? That's what our problem is. And so our children have nothing. So anybody can come from any nation state, come get a building that's empty since you was going to school, and next week they're selling you your braids and eyelashes and some toilet paper. I'm serious, and they're not paying Negro taxes, and our people keep wondering, how come these people come from other nations and they get wealthy right away? Our people don't even know they're not even paying certain taxes, because it doesn't apply to people that ain't property. Because people that have nationalities are protected by national and international law. To the people would fill these buildings. We have the resources. Our resources are being drained because our people take them to other institutions, you see? That's what our problem is. And so our children have nothing. So anybody can come from any nation state, come get a building that's empty since you was going to school, and next week they're selling you your braids and eyelashes and some toilet paper. Nothing. So anybody can come from any nation state, come get a building that's empty since you was going to school, and next week they're selling you your braids and eyelashes and some toilet paper. I'm serious, and they're not paying Negro taxes, and our people keep wondering, how come these people come from other nations and they get wealthy right away? Our people don't even know they're not even paying certain taxes, because it doesn't apply to people that ain't property. Nothing. So anybody can come from any nation state, come get a building that's empty since you was going to school, and next week they're selling you your braids and eyelashes and some toilet paper. I'm serious, and they're not paying Negro taxes, and our people keep wondering, how come these people come from other nations and they get wealthy right away? Our people don't even know they're not even paying certain taxes, because it doesn't apply to people that ain't property. Because people that have nationalities are protected by national and international law. Persons that are called colored, which means artificial persons, are Christian property. They're registered in the state of Delaware as chattel property and don't even know it. That's why every third president has to sign for them to even vote with those names that aren't theirs. That way they won't render back to Caesars, because they think they're their names, their property. And so the prophet brought back the title to the lost estate and your naming nationality, and we're still playing around with this stuff. Only because it's not being properly explained. And they get wealthy right away. Our people don't even know they're not even paying certain taxes, because it doesn't apply to people that ain't property. Because people that have nationalities are protected by national and international law. Persons that are called colored, which means artificial persons, are Christian property. They're registered in the state of Delaware as chattel property and don't even know it. That's why every third president has to sign for them to even vote with those names that aren't theirs. That way they won't render back to Caesars. It's chattel property and don't even know it. That's why every third president has to sign for them to even vote with those names that aren't theirs. That way they won't render back to Caesars, because they think they're their names, their property. And so the prophet brought back the title to the lost estate and your naming nationality, and we're still playing around with this stuff. Only because it's not being properly explained. Do you understand? And for everybody, keep in mind, President Obama went to Hikuta, called Egypt, right? And he revealed to the world that the United States Constitution was adopted from Muslim law. At the same time, in contradiction to the tradition, when the president and his wife the First Lady leaves the country, they are always presented together, correct? It's like you're coming here right now, we present you together, right? Well, the prophet and his wife, the president and his wife triangulated. He went to Hikupta, she went to the Alhambra, the last stronghold of the Moors before the Christians took over the world. And then after they came back, they immediately signed the rights of indigenous people, with Principle 5 declaring that these people declare their nationality. Now you see why them Europeans, no matter what Obama says you're a Muslim? Because they know he knows the real history. Our people, we think they talk about some kind of religious prayer system. They're talking politics. Because they know they're occupying foreign government. They're European Romans, and our people think they're white Americans. White is a status, not a complexion, and they're not Americans. They're occupying your land. You see the problem? Some kind of religious prayer system. They're talking politics. Because they know they're occupying foreign government. They're European. They are always presented together, correct? It's like you're coming here right now, we present you together, right? Well, the prophet and his wife, the president and his wife triangulated. He went to Hikupta, she went to the Alhambra, the last stronghold of the Moors before the Christians took over the world. And then after they came back, they immediately signed the rights of indigenous people, with Principle 5 declaring that these people declare their nationality. Now you see why them Europeans, no matter what Obama says you're a Muslim? Because they know he knows the real history. Our people, we think they talk about some kind of religious prayer system. They're talking politics. Because they know they're occupying foreign government. They're European Romans, and our people think they're white Americans. White is a status, not a complexion, and they're not Americans. They're occupying your land. You see the problem? We're the Al-Moroccans. Al, descended down from Moroccans, American, Moroccans, Marrakesh. You see? Americans, you're the Americans. And we be calling him American. Then when he takes the sovereign position, because we call him white, which means God and ruler of the land, we think it means complexion. That's a title they took on with the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath in 1854 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to 63 in Chicago, Illinois under Horace Greeley when they changed the Whigmore Party to the White Party, and that's when the European occupiers took on the title white man. And our people don't even know their own history. And that the title belongs to them. It's a legal status, has nothing to do with complexion. You see? And so without our people really learning government, they are using language that actually denies their own birthright. You see the point? Because they don't study law. And yet the temples were set up just like the Grand Sheik was saying, in the old days, because the mosques were actually universities. And you're supposed to learn everything. It's supposed to be your school, your science, everything. It's not just when you're doing, salami, bologna thing. No, and really that's what they've become. And this is why we've fallen, because we've given up our principles and start following after the idol gods of Europe fell, and then we won't render that back to Caesars and wonder why we all messed up. And I think we're going to pray ourselves out of this. Well, no, we're going to have to get to work, and we're going to render that crap back to them Europeans. Don't get angry because it's our fault. We ain't totally innocent. You know what I mean? And use knowledge, because it is our forefathers that brought the Europe. That's why even when you look in the literature, in the Moorish literature, you'll see in the back where the prophet talks about the Renaissance. And so what happens as soon as you find the Renaissance and you start doing the research, that's the Moors going into Europe, bringing the Europeans out of darkness into marvelous light. They're ruling you with your own stuff. And so here the Moors, they be looking at, that white man's education, I ain't going there. Oh, that's a book, I ain't reading that, that's corny. That's that white stuff. That's your stuff. That's why they're ruling you. That's why the prophet said, get a good European education so I can use you. Why? Because that education is a Moorish education. You see the whole point? But we don't know our history, so we throw the baby out with the bathwater. But that's the corruption that's in us. And a lot of the biases that we charge the world with is actually in us, and we need to clean up and learn to love instead of hate. But I'm going to read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations. And for those, and I know you all know, but this is for others that will be coming to these venues in this near future to be redeemed in both mind, spirit, and body, and economically, that they would have a proper concept of what the prophet asked of us to do. Because a lot of people pretend that, you know, they want to make up ideas of the foundation of this movement. It ain't about no civic stuff. It ain't about no law stuff. It's just praise, just religious and hallelujah. Spirit and body, and economically, that they would have a proper concept of what the prophet asked of us to do. Because a lot of people pretend that, you know, they want to make up ideas of the foundation of this movement. It ain't about no civic stuff. It ain't about no law stuff. It's just praise, just religious and hallelujah to you. You know that kind of stuff, right? Well, let's listen to what the prophet has to say, and then you be the judge. Again, then you'll know who Cointelpro operatives are, which means trying to send your children to death, working for the Romans, and those who are really trying to help uplift the fallen humanity and establish the proper temples for these people. And this is editorials that were taken from the Moorish newspapers. All right? Unfortunately, well, we want to make sure the paper's back in place, but because that's the standard. Because if a temple ain't got literature, you don't have a school, it's not a temple. It's like somebody sells you a car, and you say, oh, that car is so nice, shiny wheels. And then you put a key in. You think the battery's bad? And then you pull up the hood. It ain't got no battery, and it ain't got no engine. And this is a temple that doesn't have a school and doesn't have a press. They're in violation. They're operating in name only. It's called, in law, color. And he said, you are not Negro, black, and colored. And if you don't pass them first degrees, it's what says no need to tell them anything else. You get the point? That goes on multiple levels. So let's go to the prophet's words, analyze this, and let us get about the work of our mothers and our fathers for the redemption of our nation. Editorial. Divine warning by the prophet for the nations. The citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and are subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatments that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the names and the principles that delude to slavery. And I, the prophet, was prepared by the great God Allah to warn my people to repent from their sinful ways and go back to that state of mind of their forefathers' divine and national principles, that they will be law-abiders and receive their divine right as citizens according to the free national constitution that was prepared for all free national beings. They are to claim their own free national name and religion. There is but one issue for them to be recognized by this government and of the earth, and it comes only through the connection of the Moorish divine national movement, which is incorporated in this government and recognized by all other nations of the world. And through it, they and their children can receive their divine rights unmolested by other citizens, that they can cast a free national ballot at the polls under the free national constitution of the state's government and not under a granted privilege as has been the existing condition for many generations. You who doubt whether I, the prophet, and my principles are right for the redemption of my people, go to those who know law. Go to those who know law. In the city hall and among the officials in your government, and ask them in an intelligent tone, and they will be glad to render you a favorable reply. For they are glad to see me bring you out of darkness into light. Money doesn't make the man. It is free national standards and power that makes a man and a nation. The wealth of all national governments, gold and silver and commerce, belong to the citizens alone, and without your national citizenship by name and principles, you have no true wealth. And I am hereby calling on all true citizens that stand for a national free government and the enforcement of the Constitution to help me in my great missionary work, because I need all support from all true American citizens of the United States of America. Help me to save my people who have fallen from the constitutional laws of government. I am depending on your support to get them back to the constitutional fold again, that they will learn to love instead of hate, and will live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, supporting our free national Constitution of the United States of America. I love my people, and I desire their unity in mind back to their own national and divine standard, because day by day they have been violating the national and constitutional laws of their government by claiming names and principles that are unconstitutional. If Italians, Greeks, English, Chinese, Japanese, Turks, and Arabians are forced to proclaim their free national name and religion before the constitutional government of the United States of America, it is no more than right that the laws should be enforced upon all other American citizens alike. In all other governments, when a man is born and raised there and asks for his national descent name, and if he fails to give it, he is misused, imprisoned, or exiled. And any group of people that fail to answer up to the constitutional standards of law by name and principles, because to be a citizen of any government, you must claim your national descent name, because they place their trust upon issues and names formed by their forefathers. The word Negro alludes in the Latin language to the word nigger, the same as the word colored, quote unquote, alludes to anything that is painted, varnished, and dyed. And every nation must bear a national descent name of their forefathers, because honoring thy fathers and thy mothers, your days will be lengthened upon the earth. And these names have never been recognized by any true American citizens of this day. And through your free national name, you are known and recognized by all the nations of the earth, and are recognized by the said government, national government in which they live. The 14th and 15th Amendments brought the North and the South into unit, placing the Southerners, who were at that time without power, with the constitutional body of power. And at that time, 1865, the free national constitutional law that was enforced since 1774 declared by all men equal and free. And if all men are declared by the free national constitution to be free and equal, since that constitution has never been changed, there is no need for the application of the 14th and 15th Amendments for the salvation of our people and citizens. So there isn't but one supreme issue for my people to use to redeem that which was lost, and that is through the above statements. Then the lion and the lamb can lie down together in yonder hills, and neither will be harmed, because love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice will be reigning in this land. And in those days, the United States will be one of the greatest countries, or civilized and prosperous governments of the world. But if the above principles are not carried out by the citizens and my people in this government, the worst is yet to come. Because the great God of the universe is not pleased with the works that are being performed in North America by my people, and this great sin must be removed from the land to save it from enormous earthquakes, diseases, etc. And I, the prophet, do hereby believe the administration of the government being more wisely prepared by more genius citizens, that believe in their free national constitution and laws, and through the help of such classes of citizens, I, the prophet, truly believe that my people will find the true and divine way of their forefathers and learn to stop serving carnal customs that merely ideas of men that have never done them any good but have always harmed them. So I, the prophet, am hereby calling aloud with a divine plea to all true American citizens to help me to remove this great sin which has been committed and is being practiced by my people in the United States of America, because they know it is not the true and divine way, and without understanding they have fallen from the true light into utter darkness and sin. And there is not a nation on the earth today that will recognize them socially, religiously, politically, or economically, etc., in their present condition of their endeavorment in which they themselves try to force upon a civilized world. They will not refrain from their sinful ways and actions, and their deeds have brought Jim Crowism, segregation, and everything that brings harm to human beings on earth. And they fought the Southerner for all these great misuses. But I have traveled in the South and have examined conditions there, and it is the works of my people continuously practicing the things which bring dishonor, disgrace, and disrespect to any nation that lives the life. And I'm hereby calling on all true American citizens for moral support and financial help me in my great missionary work to bring my people out of darkness into marvelous light. Signed, Prophet Nubudrali. Is that confusing about what this movement is about? Not at all, is it? Now, if I say to you all, now you all have some level of consciousness, but we take this information out according to the prophet, and he said, I've given you more than enough to save yourselves. I've given you more than enough to save a nation. Now go out on my word and redeem your people. And on the minister's papers, the sheikh's papers, it says hedges and the highways. What have they done? They've made little clubs. You see the problem? They have not produced literature. They shut down the prophet's paper. They shut down the canning factories in Camden. They shut down the fishing fleet. Moorish movement had one of the largest fishing fleets on the East Coast. And here the Moors and temples don't even know that. They had canning factories in Camden. How come the Grand Chiefs don't talk about that? Because they don't want you to know that they betrayed the movement. Do you understand? And so when people come into this movement and they see the things that are needed, you know, and then they just see these buildings and people going hallelujah to you and nothing else, and then they leave, and then the sheiks start saying they don't appreciate what the prophet did. No, they don't appreciate maladministration, that's what. They don't appreciate misappropriations of funds. They don't appreciate people saying they follow the prophet when they make sure the temples don't have a school, when they shut down the prophet's newspapers, and when they block information about what the prophet really set up. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So anybody in the temple that is not a constitutionalist logically is not following what the prophet commanded for us to do, because he said, help me in my mission to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution, United States of America. He's letting you know that's just what Obama said. Well, it came from your law. And he said, if you don't think that the program that I have for my people and the citizens is right, go to those who know law. Then grand governors tell these Moors to draw lead in T-Civic. See where the problem is? And the people listen to them. And so now what's happening is you have a lot of Moors and a lot of temples across the land. They don't even know how to protect the Moors when they're being thrown out of their houses because they don't teach law. Do you see the point? When these banks did these fraud mortgages on these people and start taking people's houses, the grand sheiks, they're put in place to enforce law And then they tell the Moors, do I lead and teach civics, and then stuff is happening to Moors. They're suffering things that should have been cured, and Moors are on the curb, out of their houses, don't even know they got an estate. Because the Grand Chiefs didn't tell them, because they hide that side of what Noble Drawley taught. Talking about, it's just a religious organization. And people let them get away with it because they don't know. That's why it's important to produce literature and get this information out to the people. Don't be looking at, look at our people. He said, come all ye Asiatics of North America and hear the truth about your nationality and birthright. He didn't say only club members. Do you understand? And yet, that perception, unfortunately, is with a lot of people thinking that if you ain't in the temple, you can't be a Moor, which is a fraud. It's like telling the Chinese, unless he's egg for young, he can't be Chinese. And the fact that we even buy into these things that some of these so-called sheiks say is interesting. It really is. But it's also shameful. But it doesn't have to be that way. And as long as we have some honorable Moors coming into this movement, it won't be that way. And keep this in mind. Evil men have prospered because good men have sat on their butts too long. But it doesn't have to be that way. And as long as we have some honorable Moors coming into this movement, it won't be that way. And keep this in mind. Evil men have prospered because good men have sat on their butts too long.
Islam to all the Moors worldwide, not sitting on their butts, but actually studying and learning the truth about their nationality and their birthrights, and uplifting fallen humanity, which starts with themselves and yourselves and herself and his self. Honors to the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Honors to Taj Tarik Bey. Nobody can talk any BS about Taj Tarik Bey. Stop the BS. Honors to all the Moors worldwide. Don't forget rvbaypublications.com. It's Wednesday today, 7:30. Honors to all the Moors. Peace and love to all. Peace and love to all. Honors to all the mothers. Islam.